what we need to do now
Yeah.
is make a combat system for social
Encounters?
situations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this would...
Where it's
good to-
you roll your charisma or you roll your diplomacy, and it's rolled as an attack skill.
I have a question that came up on Reddit about a week ago, and I wanted to give you this need advice piece.
Need advice. Great. Dear Abby.
Yeah, dear DM Academy, because that's actually the subreddit that's on.
Oh, my bad.
Yeah, let me read this for you. The headline, very provocative. That's the reason I had to find out about this. All my players became Archfey. Okay, so...
Isn't Archfey, like...
Yeah, like very powerful members of the Feywild, essentially. Yeah.
Is that... No, I'm thinking Archdruid. Anyways, go on.
Okay, let me read this. So, my players went to the Feywild, and day one, they tricked their way into becoming Archfey. Now they rule the Summer Court. To create stakes, I made all treaties the Summer Court had with the other courts null and void since they were created with by the former ruler. My question is, do you guys have advice on running a political campaign? I'm thinking of making this a Bridgerton-like arc for my players, but I don't know what mechanics to put in place to make this fun for them. My initial thought is never let your players become Archfey. It seems like an easy thing. But anyway...
I feel like you're playing a different game at that point.
It feels
if you
different.
Want to make it a political campaign.
Yeah. Because...
like, obviously, you can make it just a war campaign if you want to, because that fits in with the combat and everything, but...
This is why I wanted to get your opinion on it, because D&D, which is what they're using right here, D&D does not really lend itself to this kind of gameplay. There are social skills. I understand that. There's deception, and there's intimidation, and there's, like, charisma-based stuff. But it's really not built for that. Like,
really.
It's not really built for that. So, if you were doing, like, I have not watched Bridgerton. I guess it's like Victorian thing, I guess, with politics.
Sure. I don't watch shows, especially politics shows.
I don't watch the period pieces all that often, so I don't know. But I'll assume that it has something to do with, like, the politics of high society and stuff like that.
Sure.
If that were the case, you found yourself in a D&D campaign. This is what it is now. What are we doing?
It's now political intrigue.
It's now political intrigue. What are we doing with this? Is this
I'm sending assassins at them.
You're sending assassins at them all day, every day, all the time?
Everybody's an assassin. Watch your back.
Okay. So basically what we're doing is we're working as, like, armchair general. And we have to send out our people. That's what our stats become. Like, all of our hit points are our troops. And
I feel like, actually, we talked about this a little while ago for D&D, for the Unearthed Arcana? No, what was it? Strongholds?
Oh, yeah.
Bastions.
Yeah. Bastions. That's right.
I think you want to pick up the set of rules for that.
Probably.
And then find another game that's got some really good social mechanics.
Yeah. You'd have to pick up the 2024 rulebook, because I think that's going to be in there. But yeah, the Bastions mechanics where you can actually upgrade and build your own, like, essentially stronghold out of it and stuff like that.
But even that is just a different... That's not political. Political stuff, you need social mechanics.
No, and you still have your own
the D&D mechanics for social stuff they don't encourage the role-playing, they just kind of encourage rolling, and then D&D does not incentivize experience gain or anything like that for
No, there
role-playing.
There isn't.
So,
yeah,
it's messy.
Yeah, I mean, that has always been something I found odd. Well, I guess lacking in D&D is that basically the only way you gain experience is through combat. And
Well, yes and no. You have to assign like CR levels to social encounters, and then you go, okay, this social encounter that you had is worth, but that is not something that really incentivizes in the game, and it doesn't really give you a real way to equate like what's a challenging social encounter versus an easy one, or any like guidelines really for it. And I know there are rules and it tells you a little bit about it, but it's not concrete enough. And I feel like a lot of DMs don't utilize that.
There's not like charisma combat. You know, like where you could say that there's like you and your opponent have like almost like Rock'em Sock'em Robots, but it's charisma based. You have a stamina bar of like your tolerance level. And they have a tolerance level.
I feel like what we need to do now
Yeah.
is make a combat system for social
Encounters.
situations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this would
Where it's
good to-
you roll your charisma or you roll your diplomacy, and it's rolled as an attack skill,
Yeah.
and they have a certain amount of like charisma defense.
Yes, I think this could actually work. Refresh my memory, though. I think there's 3 basic, like, social skills when it comes to D&D. I want to say that it's deception, it's intimidation, and it's persuasion. Persuasion. Okay, so we create a social encounter. You're sitting across from a lord. The lord has certain defense skills, like plus whatever to resistances and to attacks. In those social skills, you have the same basic thing. You basically have 10 points of stamina in these encounters, and you have to basically determine how am I going to, try and influence this lord. And so now you have to figure out, am I going to attack with like an intimidation or something like that? Maybe they're really strong against intimidation and they don't like that. You critically fail that, you're in trouble. Because then they get angry. But, maybe you succeed in that, and then you take away some of their, like, stamina in this, essentially. And so you roll it almost like it is actually a combat. And when you defeat the Lord, you've, in this social combat, you've essentially defeated him in the same way.
I think this is a system they need to implement.
Yeah,
I'd have to design it myself.
Yeah, we'll design it itself. It's like, yeah, let's do an actual social encounter. There's a lot of interesting things you can do with D&D outside of the combat mechanics as written. D&D is funny because there's a lot of combat involved that actually gives you that experience, but they give you this framework that makes you think that there's tons of other ways that you actually gain experience, do things. There's knowledges and there's learning and exploration,
there are,
and
but
all
none of
that.
them are as quantifiable.
Exactly, but it does feel like you could do that. Like, if you make discoveries or explore certain parts of the terrain or something, there's nothing that says that couldn't have XP associated with it, or collecting and gathering and learning about stuff, and you make successful nature checks and you learn about things, discovery and all of that stuff. But yeah, the social encounter, which I think is kind of what the political campaign that we're talking about here would have to be reliant on, there's 3 different stats that they've already, like, out of the box put in here, and probably a handful of other, like, knowledge stats and stuff that could be supplemental to that in order to learn. I could definitely see where religion or history or nature could end up being skills you use to suss out what your opponent is good at or bad at, and stuff like that. Learn the weaknesses and strengths of your opponent.
I feel like you'd also need to add skill in for espionage at that point.
Probably, yeah.
Or spycraft.
Spycraft doesn't necessarily need to be a skill, but it could definitely be a mechanic all of its own that the skills go into, the existing skill set goes into.
That's fair.
Where your spycraft stat, essentially, or your spies that are available, you're able to recruit or do stuff with based on your social stats. If you have, high charisma, or if you're able to utilize that in some way. I think that might be cool. And would definitely feel more kinetic than what I think a lot of social encounters come down to, which is like somebody asks you a question, and do I succeed at answering the question or whatever, you know. I need a parcel of your land, and I'm debating whether we have rights over it. And then I make a roll. You succeed at the roll. Congratulations. Yay. It feels like it does need to be sussed out more than that. So maybe this whole thing that's like literally a combat, but it is a social combat that you're going into. I kind of frankly feel bad for the DM in this case, because it feels like this has turned into a completely different campaign than they planned on.
I don't feel bad for them. It's fine. It's their own fault.
It's their own fault. My players went into the Feywild. Day 1, they were tricked into becoming Archfey. Tricked by who? Why did you let them get tricked by Archfey? Yeah, those damn Archfey. Just hanging out in the Feywild. Yeah. You just let them become... You could have stopped this. I feel like...
You could have. Kill them all. Burn the Feywild down.
You know, the ironic thing is, I don't know how they turned into Archfey, but I'm thinking that if we actually had this system in place, that would be like a social combat. You could have done this with the Archfey, or whatever's going on, and you could set those skills, like, really, really high, so that it would be very difficult for them in order to be this. I don't know what mechanics to put in place to make this fun for them. Well, like I said, if you had some kind of a combat mechanic that was based on the social skills, you could probably do that. Espionage would be interesting. There's probably a way that we could implement some kind of espionage system as almost like a Bastion sort of thing, where you have like a spy guild, and then you could like use the spy guild in order to like send out scouts and do that. I feel like, though, this is no longer D&D, this is Civilization. You're playing Civ 6 now. You need to get a civic victory. Instead of a war victory. This is a different one of the 4X's that you're now doing.
You're playing Crusader Kings 3 now.
Oh my god. I never want to do that. Please don't make me do that again. Oh, Crusader Kings 3. So many tabs. Talking about our last conversation about tutorials, man, I feel like I need a freaking textbook on how to play Crusader Kings 3.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot.
Yeah, there's tabs all the way around the screen for Crusader Kings 3.
4X games are wild.
Oh man, yeah. That one especially. Usually when we're talking about D&D, we're talking about one of the 4X's, which is the exterminate part. Yeah. But yeah, there are 3 others, and if you wanted to play those in D&D, I guess, sure, but we would have to probably modify a lot of the mechanics in order to make that work. I think it's a similar problem too with, like, if you wanted to play a stealth version of D&D.
That'd be easier.
I mean, there is a stealth skill, or a sneak, but I always found that to be overly simplistic, too, because it's kind of like, do I successfully sneak or do I not? And I
guess that's fair.
It ain't Splinter Cell, let me put it that way. Again, a lot of the implementation could be there, but it's not really expanded upon in the game about how you could use it in interesting ways. There's no light meters in D&D. There isn't, like, figuring out the creative way to do a stealth mission, which could be very useful if you are playing an espionage kind of campaign, which might come into the political thing. But if you are really just running a straight-up political campaign where you're now ruling the Summer Court, and you have to deal with it says to create stakes and made all the treaties they had with other courts null and void. So I'm going to guess the idea is that you as the Summer Court are going to have negotiations with other courts. If that's the case, then I would imagine your best bet is to try and have those as, like we were saying before, some kind of a combat way of doing that social engagement. That's not just, well, I succeeded at an intimidation check. Congratulations, you win all the courts. You are now the main Archfey of Archfeyness. Congratulations. If you got yourself into a situation where your D&D campaign turned into this, how fast are you running away from that game?
As soon as possible.
Yeah, pretty much. I didn't really go to my fantasy epic game world where I get to have, like, magic skills and go on adventures so that I can sit at a big desk and debate political ramifications with other people.
Yeah, that's not what I go.
I try to avoid that in real life most of the time. I don't really want to do it here, but everybody's fun is different. The question really becomes, should D&D even be run as a political campaign?
If you modify it, for sure it's able to, but if you're looking for a political campaign, I'm sure there are other better suited role-playing games for that.
I feel like there's probably like a Powered by the Apocalypse game that got modified into something like this that would work better in general. D&D is not a one-size-fits-all for every role-playing experience. I think it's always important for us to explain that.
And I don't think people should think it is.
No. If you want to do investigations, like Call of Cthulhu is probably better suited for stuff like that. Or if you're looking for, like, noir or social encounters, you might find Vampire the Masquerade to be more useful for you in that regard. Stuff like that. You know, there's different games play very differently. That is not a bad thing. That is a function of making a different thing. You can do a lot with D&D, but it is kind of focused on being a combat-oriented game where you're going out and doing adventures and slaying monsters. It's kind of built for that, and everything else you kind of have to modify and make it work. I understand that this is kind of one of those unique cases where you were playing a D&D campaign and then it turned into something else, so you kind of have to make it work. You know, one of the things that I would actually reference here is Adventure Zone. In Adventure Zone, the first campaign that they did, all done in D&D, except for this one point toward the end where they had to do flashbacks. And they were doing flashbacks to kind of determine kind of like how they got to there in stuff that they did not know, their characters were not aware of previous to the campaign. And they were establishing what all of that was. And so they were trying to figure out, like, bonds and stuff like that with other characters. For that, what Griffin did is specifically create a little system that was made in Powered by the Apocalypse, specifically. And then, based on what the characters did in that system during that time, it kind of informed what was available to them at the end of the game when they go back to D&D. So there's nothing that says that if this is going to be a part of it, you can't tack something else on in order to, like, modify that system.
That's very true.
Yeah, so that might also be helpful for you. Another option. But, yeah, let's go ahead and make ourselves a whole social combat system for the game. That'd be great.
Social combat away!
Yeah, exactly. Flawless victory.
And then, as a bard, you can actually attack people with your insults.
You could. You absolutely could. You just end up being, you come from the College of Bullshit.
Called a bard shit.
Bard shit, yeah. The bard shit tale.
Bard shite.
That needs to be a campaign for D&D. It's just called bard shite. Griftonomics. You can make it happen, folks. If you have any ideas on what you would like to do for a political campaign in D&D, why would you? But if you do want to try it, you let us know about some of the ways you would actually pull it off. Just a side question. How the hell do you let your players become Archfey the first day they go into the Feywild?
Carefully.
No, apparently not carefully at all. Very recklessly, in fact, that you would do that.
It happens.
It has happened at least once.